Ladies and gentlemen, poets and praise singers, special guests and spoken word performers, lovers of language and holders of hope, welcome to the third annual AVBOB Poetry Gala in its first ever online edition. I'm Roseanne McKenzie and I'll be your host for the evening. We're gathered here tonight, virtually, to celebrate poetry and the poets of South Africa and to affirm a certain truth, that words on a page have the power to connect us. That while global pandemics and perceived differences may keep us apart, poetry pulls us together and ravels and reweaves our social fabric, nothing less. We'd like to give a special word of welcome to the chairman of the AVBOB Board of Directors, Professor Piet Delpoort, members of the Board of Directors, AVBOB CEO, Mr. Carl van der Riet, the AVBOB Executive Committee members, AVBOB staff, Brand et al. CEO, Dr. Christo van der Westhuizen, and representatives, our Editor-in-Chief, Johan de Lange, and our 11 language editors, and most importantly, our poets, both commissioned and prize-winning. We'd also like to acknowledge the celebrities and influencers among us who we hope will use the power of their social platforms to promote the AVBOB Poetry Project. The AVBOB Poetry Project was born of a daily tragedy that AVBOB faces with their customers. How to provide mourners with words of hope when their world feels as if it has fallen apart. And so, all South Africans of all ages, writing in all 11 official languages, were invited to enter poems in a first-of-its-kind competition with the themes of love, hope, death, and birth to guide them. What has resulted after just 3 years is a community of over 18,000 registered poets, over 80,000 poems submitted, and over 10,000 poems now available in the free online poetry library for mourners to use as a source of comfort and consolation, and for ordinary South Africans to draw inspiration and hope from. And someone who inspires hope in all of us is Pretoria-born and raised spoken word artist Funo Celesho. Funo has performed on local and international platforms for almost 10 years. Sought after by poetry collectives and corporates alike, her performances lift poems off the page and give them presence and force. She wields words as her sword and wants nothing more than to uplift, inspire, and breathe hope into the world with her art. She'll be performing Business as Usual by Graham Dukas, a poem from the AVBOB Poetry Print Anthology. Ladies and gentlemen, please make some virtual noise for the insanely talented Funo Celesho.
Business as Usual by Graham Dukas. The cottage makes its way between older, more settled mounds, then splits to encircle a fresh pile of earth and an empty, waiting grave. The mood is somber. Black abounds and faces are solemnly set. Here and there, mostly towards the front, wet eyes are quietly dabbed with tissues and delicate handkerchiefs and manly knuckles, so blunt. A silence deeper than the present one descends as the speaker draws his breath and, addressing family and friends, delivers the comforting words one associates with death. High over his shoulder, coming our way, an object moves without fuss, not loudly, but with a slow, reassuring hum. As it draws closer until finally the angel appears slightly south of us. Passing at a respectable distance, a tiny aircraft reflects the light and trails a banner at least twice its length, which reassures us that Mavericks has a special on tonight.
And we too have something rather special on tonight, right? We have a passion for poetry that connects us all, no matter where we come from and where we're headed. And someone who is headed on a purposeful journey is AVBOB CEO Carl van der Riet. He's going to share a few words with us tonight on the importance of poetry in the grieving process and how it helps us heal. Carl van der Riet was appointed as an external actuary at AVBOB in 2007 and became CEO in November 2019. Though an actuary by profession, Carl is an empath at heart, and he found in the funeral and insurance provider a place of compassion and connection. AVBOB is there right to the end of life's journey, and that makes them custodians of a timeless binding ritual. And Carl would not have it any other way. Please put your virtual hands together for AVBOB CEO Carl van der Riet. Welcome, Carl.
Thank you, Roseanne.
Floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. Thank you for joining us as we gather online to celebrate the tremendous impact, upliftment, and inspiration that the AVBOB Poetry Project provides for all South Africans. While only in its third year, the project continues to gather momentum and grow, and still manages to surprise and delight us with its ongoing outreach and evolution. The Poetry Project has added a richness, a clarity and a depth to our lives that we did not realize was missing, which we find we cannot do without. And we need these qualities now more than ever. For those of you who may not know, the AVBOB Poetry Project was established in 2017 to provide bereaved families with a place to unburden and find comfort when faced with grief. As a funeral service provider with over 100 years' experience, we're all too keenly aware of the importance of catharsis, of being able to articulate one's grief as part of the healing process. And what better way to do so than in the form of a poem? Poets from across the country were thus invited to participate and submit their poems in any of our 11 official languages. The project aimed to provide an online platform for poets to express their unspoken thoughts and to bring us closer to those whom we love, both present and past, and to make us more attuned to the universe in which we navigate our lives. Perhaps most importantly of all, it was our hope that the project would bring us closer to our truest and highest selves. I believe that this unique project has not only met but surpassed these goals. Now, it's hard to scientifically gauge the impact that the Poetry Project has had. I mean, how does one apply a metric to a mourner's sense of comfort and consolation? But judging from the comments of our poets across our social media pages and from the thousands of entries we've received, we've managed to touch the lives of countless South Africans. And that's precisely what we set out to do. At the time that the project was launched, I was just joining AVBOB as the Deputy CEO, and I remember being awed by this humble yet ambitious project. South Africa at that time was in a state of turmoil, and as a nation, we found ourselves faltering. Looking back, the challenges of those days seemed insurmountable, but we persevered and we never gave up hope. And that's the measure of who we are: resilient, resourceful, and resolved. Of course, as we experience the upheavals and shocks of the current COVID-19 crisis and are compelled to reorient our lives, we're able to look back at those past challenges and see the value in them. Because everything we've been through as a nation over time has strengthened us and made us more resilient. Our past challenges have forced us to become more agile and innovative, to move forward and focus on the positive, to forge stronger bonds between us. I believe it is this resilience that will get us past this COVID-19 pandemic and take us towards a brighter and a more brilliant future. Tonight, I'd like to say thank you to each poet for their bravery and for their willingness to be vulnerable. It takes tremendous courage to share one's intimate thoughts and feelings with others. We honor you for your honesty, for your generosity, and for sharing this journey with us. I would also like to thank the people who spearheaded and managed the project. Our Editor-in-Chief, Mr. Johan de Lange, Brand et al. Group MD, Christoph van der Westhuizen, our General Manager, Corporate Affairs, Mr. Adrian Bester, and Brand and Advertising Manager, Natasha Minnie. And then all our spirited editors, who for the past 3 years have taken a deep dive into the soul and psyche of ordinary South Africans. What they have found there is richness, is talent, infinite forgiveness, and unfettered potential. And so, on to the real purpose of the evening. We're gathered here to acknowledge and celebrate the winners of the third AVBOB Poetry Competition and to release our third print anthology, produced as part of the broader project. This unique and highly collectible anthology contains a total of 102 poems, 33 of which were crafted by the first to third prize winners of the 2019 competition, and 66 of which were specifically commissioned from our leading poets across the land in all 11 languages. We then included a further 3 poems in the Khoisan language. Why, you may ask? Because we want this anthology to be a place where all the voices of our land will merge. We want these anthologies to serve as an historical record, a living repository of all the languages of South Africa. We want these volumes to give voice to the complex, remarkable, and multifaceted country in which we live. And finally, we want them to serve as a record of our resilience. Ladies and gentlemen, AVBOB is extremely proud of this initiative and we are honored to be associated with each and every one of you who has done so much to make a success of this project. We've seen the AVBOB Poetry platform grow over 3 years to accommodate more than 18,000 registered poets, and the entries to the annual competition climb year on year as people see the absolute value of this portal. We currently have a free online bereavement resource of over 10,000 original poems, crafted by South Africans, for South Africans, in their time of grief. We have a community of engaged poets who are speaking to one another in their mother tongues, and who, through the competition, have seen their words and their languages validated and championed. And more importantly, we've found a language, the language of poetry, which connects us all. While this evening brings the 3rd annual AVBOB Poetry Competition to a close, it also marks a new beginning, the launch of the 4th AVBOB Poetry Competition, which will run from 1 August to 30th of November 2020. We would like to encourage all our guests to spread the word about the next competition. Please connect with us by liking the AVBOB Poetry page on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We also invite you to visit our online poetry anthology, which is freely available on www.avbobpoetry.co.za. And now, please enjoy the upcoming performance by renowned poet, Mr. Loftus Murray. Thank you all, and take care.
Thank you so much, Carl, for those great words.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Roseanne.
Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls. Khalil Gibran's words remind us of how brave the poet must be. He or she must dive deep into themselves in order to reveal their truth. Loftus Murray is one such poet. Loftus spent his childhood roaming barefoot in the Paarl Valley and the Great Karoo. He has published 3 award-winning poetry collections, which have been described as thus. The focus is on the throwaway moment, the unexpected illumination, the shy revelation, all of which shine through the muck and mutability and banality of everyday life with a charming persistence and with reluctant love. He'll be performing his own poem, Begrafniskitsch. Please make some virtual noise for Loftus Murray.
Begrafniskitsch. Gun my 'n finale kom-en-waar konkreetheid voor die wasigheid van ewigheid. Familie, sagte heilers almal, chunk die keer sodat die kerk kan echo. 'n Kerk is tog maar net 'n tipe klankversterker. En beprik dit als met snikke. Op die briefprogram 'n pixelated foto van my bakkies in 'n raampatroon wat krul. En agterop 'n kakgediggie deur 'n vers en klank verslaafde veraf oom. 'n Moerse ryker in die middel, soos 'n klein bioom. Ek soek 'n PowerPoint slideshow met die orrel as die klankbaan. Kyk hoe happy was hy, kyk hoe hartseer is ons almal nou. Niks is meer vermurwend as die Afrikaner vals vibrato van die tantes in psalm en gesang. En hy wat die bedankings gaan behartig, moet 'n snor hê. Ons vra dat u motor se hoofligte sal aanskakel sodra u in die stoet in beweeg. Moet daaraan gebrom word. Na die tyd, die drumsticks en gevulde eiers, te veel broodjies in Euklidiese gelid, oumas in hul floral print met sneesies in die moue, hande aan die wring. Alles so gepas, verstaan. Die dood is tog die onsubtielste ding.
From the unsubtleties of death to the exigencies of mourning, our next speaker, Liesel Jobson, talks to poetry's role in contemporary culture and its value as a bereavement resource. Liesel has an MA in writing and a degree in music. She's won innumerable awards, and her poetry, fiction, and children's stories have been translated into Afrikaans, Italian, Spanish, and Turkish. She's appeared at local and global literary festivals and plays bassoon and contrabassoon in the Cape Philharmonic Orchestra. When she's not weaving words or notes, you'll find her coaching rowing at Sikufle. Please put your hands together virtually for Liesel Jobson.
Hi, Roseanne.
Welcome, Liesel. We're so pleased to have you.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
Over to you.
Thank you so much. Today, we come together to honor poetry. Where would we be now without the voices that return us to our humanity? We come together to celebrate the poets who remind us who we are. Where would we be without the words that bind us at a time when community is so utterly tenuous? We come together to revel in language, in the power of revelation, recognizing the sacred work of poets who committed to daring and dared to communicate in sonnets and haiku, in elegies and laments. They are the ones who asked after a loved one's death, "What is it that I wish I'd said?" They are the ones asking themselves, "What is it that I will wish I had said?" They are the ones asking of you, "What is it that you must say?" We all know death awaits us, yet we live as if it doesn't. Or we did until recently. Dying has never been more televised, more tweeted, nor has death more intrusively been thrust into our faces. Yet, burying the dead has also never been a more alienating experience. Overwhelmed hospital staff helping families to say farewell via screens arrive on our phones and are shocking reminders of our fragile mortality. Zoom funerals feel like multiple losses. We've lost our loved ones and we've lost each other. We've lost the solidity of an embrace and we've lost closure. In the past, our rituals took place right in the midst of the living. We sang with the dead and for the dead. We sang with each other and for each other. Our memorials included praise poems and songs of faith that helped families and communities to heal. They celebrated a loved one's life and restored us to hope. In the midst of all this emptiness, what is the work of the poet? Poems can help us to weave a sense of togetherness, to retrieve ourselves, to recollect and remember each other. In words, we are stitched back together, body and soul. We are revived as we reconnect. It is a testimony and tribute to the AVBOB Poetry Project that this anthology provides us with a resource to recreate grieving practices which help us survive our sorrow. It is timely to explore the words, "I wish I'd said." It's harrowing to realize that we can no longer say what we thought we still had time for. Poetry calls us to speak in time before it is too late. The AVBOB Poetry Project invites us to write those unspoken words which allow for honesty, for compassion and forgiveness. By writing a poem to the one who is gone, we release ourselves from the trap of silence. By stepping into a poem as an active creator, we begin to map our path through grief. In his exquisite book, The Wild Edge of Sorrow, Francis Weller writes about the gift of grief. He says, "There is something feral about grief, something essentially outside the ordained and sanctioned behaviors of our culture. Because of that, grief is necessary to the vitality of the soul. Contrary to our fears, grief is suffused with life force. It is not a state of deadness or emotional flatness. Grief is alive, wild, untamed, and cannot be domesticated." Francis Weller could as well be writing about poetry, for poetry is a feral art form that is essentially outside the ordained and sanctioned. It is suffused with life force. It is alive, wild, untamed, and cannot be domesticated. poetry is necessary to the vitality of the soul. Paradoxically, death's finality can lead us to our deepest vitality. In the midst of the pandemic, what an opportune moment to explore the self that we yearn to know. I wish I'd said. What a fabulous invitation when you uncover yourself in the mirror of your poem or allow your most intimate secrets onto the privacy of a page. There is a riot of potential for healing from history, for reimagining your future, for asserting that life is still worth living. For David White, poetry is often the art of overhearing yourself say the things you didn't know you knew. It takes courage to get quiet enough, to listen deeply enough to what we know. It takes honesty to acknowledge what we don't know. It takes bravery to own up to what we hide. Yet when we take these bold steps, our poems are authentic. They resonate unmistakably. Grief can be a catalyst to say the things you didn't know you knew, and so to find yourself, perhaps for the first time. Our mortality is both a limit and an opportunity, and this is part of the sacred work of poetry. With each breath and gesture, we move ever closer to our own end. So let's not wait to ask ourselves about our unlived lives. Let's craft the poems that pose the difficult questions only we can answer. Let's explore, let's demand, let's inquire, let's listen, let's keep it real. As death invites us to take stock, so poetry invites us to bear witness. Our language tells us what we care about most. Our bodies recognize the note of truth. Our bodies release tears and even laughter when we say the unsayable, even if only to ourselves. Plan to say the words that matter most. On the page in your poem, listen deeply to the words that want to exist, that strive for expression. It's later than you think, and this life is not a dress rehearsal. So what is it that you must say? Can you now immerse yourself in your words, away from your screen, on the page, in your poem? Can you reconnect with the most ancient wisdom? Will you open to allow your spirit to guide you, to know and name yourself in your poem? This is poetry's sacred work. If we act as if every day is our final day, we can take up our pen with urgency. The work of poetry offers us a chance to live with clarity and conviction, maybe even with calm and contentment, but certainly to be bold and brazen and brilliant. If we act as if our end is near, we have the chance to arrive at our deathbed without the fear of the unspoken word, the unlived life. If in the end my poem is my protest and my prayer, I arrive at my deathbed unafraid of my purest truth, relieved and released, and light years away from saying regretfully, I wish I'd said. If I am courageous, my life is my real poem. So in every hour, as well as in my final hour, I am emboldened to trust my own feral being outside the ordained. I know my life, untamed and riotous. I celebrate the vitality of my soul, undomesticated and wild. In the words of my poem, I am alive and rejoicing because I'm glad I spoke.
Winner of AVBOB Poetry's What If South Africa Poetry Competition in 2019, Keribone Mpeti hails from Soweto. She remembers her very first poetry performance for a large crowd. She was just 12 years old and was assigned a legendary isiZulu praise poem. She performed the weighty words with vigor and high-pitched tone of a child. Since then, her poetry and performances have taken her to teaching sessions and children's poetry, and she recently featured in AVBOB's television documentary series, I Wish I'd Said. Says Keribone, I don't know what the future holds, but I have my heart fixed on using my voice, my art, in service to the need that I know exists for the grace and love found in poetry. She'll be performing Maemo Ana Atlafeta by Mpula Douglas Leteane, a Sesotho poem from the AVBOB Poetry Anthology.
Maemo ana a tla feta. Sefefo sena se tla khutsa. Mathata a fitli kajeno ke karolo ya bophelo ngwana mme. Maemo ana a tla feta. Ramasedi hana leeme o phutsa batho bohle ka mahlohonolo le wena ana ho tlohela o tla ho thusa. Maemo ana a tla feta. Ha ho senyeha ke ha ho loka. Mohale o tsa maruleng. Gauta e tswa mollong. Maemo ana a tla feta. Pula ha ena e nnela morui le mofutsana. Bothata ba hao ke thaka ya hao. Jara sefapano sa hao ka mahetla. Maemo ana a tla feta. Wena le yone le motswalle ya nakwana. Tlala e bohloko, kgora e monate. Ha o kgora nahanela balapileng. Maemo ana a tla feta. Moketa ho tsosa o itekang. Ha o hloleha o lekile o ka kapa. Ha se sebo hloleha o lekile. Maemo ana a tla feta. Abahale ba honno phunyeletsa. Le wena o nka tswela pele mohlomphehi. Monna ha o ile ha o ele le ruri. Maemo ana a tla feta. Kwekotla bokwala o hahamele pele. Makwala ha kene musong wa Ramasedi. O kena batho ba matla ba hlotseng Satane. Maemo ana a tla feta. Ha se wena fela ya bokolang. O tseba tsietsi ko feta pela yona. Maima a bapa moetapele wa kaosane. Maemo ana a tla feta. Ha o thulana le mathata ngwaneso. Leboha Ramasedi o tla lo koma. Ho belaela ho thabisa Ramautla. Maemo ana a tla feta. Bohle ba ka hodimo ba tla ya ka fatshe. Ba ka fatshe ba tla ba ya ka hodimo. Bophelo ha bo tshepahale.
And now we are absolutely thrilled and delighted to share with you the winners of the third AVBOB Poetry Competition. But before we do that, let's put our hands together for all of the poets of South Africa. It is they who must tunnel through darkness towards light, who must navigate feeling in search of truth, and who must be willing to bare their souls in order to enable us all to see what is unseen, unsaid, untold. I'd like to welcome back AVBOB CEO Carl van der Riet to join me as we announce the third to first placed winners of the third annual AVBOB Poetry Competition.
Hi.
And now on to our winners, announced alphabetically according to language category. In third place in the Afrikaans language category, we have Hannes Visser. And in second place, we have Marita Broschk. And the winner of the third AVBOB Poetry Competition in the Afrikaans language category is
Marietta Martens.
Congratulations to Marietta, the first of tonight's winners. Marietta Martens is a freelance writer based in Bloemfontein who has won multiple awards for her work. She has been writing since her father gave her an Olivetti typewriter at the age of 13. She entered the competition because it felt like a welcoming home for poets. Her winning poem was inspired by an indelible moment during her mother's final winter on Earth, the awareness of impending death. In third place in the English language category, we have Mike Linden. And in second place, we have Archie Swanson. And the winner of the third AVBOB Poetry Competition in the English language category is
Bernice Buleng Musala.
Bernice Musala is a copywriter who lives in Sandton. A social media post alerted her to the competition, but she's been writing poetry since grade 7 to express her feelings. Her poem was inspired by her brother, who at the age of 18 became the head of the household when their father abandoned the family. She sees poetry as a powerful tool to affect social awareness. In the third place in the isiNdebele language category, we have Bongi Julia Sindane. And in second place, we have Mtoche Maria Mashifana. And the winner of the third AVBOB Poetry Competition in the isiNdebele language category is
Pristine Siyabonga Schwenny.
Christine Siyabonga Mtweni is a grade 9 learner with a passion for linguistics and particularly for preserving his mother tongue. It bothered him that his father used the same isiNdebele textbook that he uses today. For the young poet, poems allow us to reimagine language, and he entered the competition to prove that he could change the world with his words. His poem, written after his mother's death, aims to bring solace to grieving souls. In third place in the isiXhosa language category, we have Songezo Xelelo. And in second place, we have Ati Simamkele Janchi. And the winner of the third AVBOB Poetry Competition in the isiXhosa language category is
Tuapiwe Fortune Schwenny.
Tuapiwe Schwenny hails from Ngobo, Eastern Cape, where he is an agripreneur. He began writing while he was in primary school, and his poems are published in multiple anthologies. He won third place in the 2018 competition and entered again to sow a seed of hope and comfort for those in need. His poem explores the relationship between parents and children and the names they bestow upon them. In third place in the isiZulu language category, we have Muntu Muhle Mcambi. And in second place, we have Siyabonga Gumalo. And the winner of the third AVBOB Poetry Competition in the isiZulu language category is
Sebastian Gili.
Sebastian Gili is a freelance journalist born and raised in Mafakatini near Pietermaritzburg, who won a Reading Association of South Africa award for a 2015 short story. He entered the competition to help people grasp that death is not the end of the road, but a gateway. After the loss of his mother, he turned to poetry for solace and believes that his poems flow directly from his soul. In third place in the Sepedi language category, we have Ntinyela Octavia Motimele. And in second place, we have Mapule Ramaila Moswane. And the winner of the third AVBOB Poetry Competition in the Sepedi language category is
Tebogo Patricia Mamabolo.
Tebogo Mamabolo stays in Shoshanguve, south of Pretoria, and works as a quality control consultant in the pharmaceutical sector. At a poetry anthology launch, she heard about the competition and decided to enter to hone her skills. But what really inspired her to write was the loss of her own child and the desire to help others navigate that painful moment of farewell. Some resounding applause, please, for our first 6 winners and for all the poets of South Africa. Power to your pens. Before we share the names of the final 5 language category winners, we're going to listen in to words of wisdom from someone who has been incredibly close to this project right from the start. Douglas Reed Skinner needs no introduction. Poet and mentor, editor and innovator, he's at the fountainhead of poetic craft and creativity. He has published 6 poetry collections, translated 4 books, has headed prominent poetry publications like New Contrast and Stanzas, and has served as the English language editor of the AVBOB Poetry Competition for the past 3 years. He will now share his often overwhelming, always exhilarating experience of the competition with you. He comes to us live from London, where he awaits the deluge of poems from the 4th annual AVBOB Poetry Competition.
Goeienaand almal. Lochani, Molweni, Sanibona, Dumelang, 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 Sanibonani, Lokobela, Imajambu Lambanene. Good evening from London, where I am unfortunately stuck in lockdown. Nou, ek wil eers Frik Rademan groet. Frik, ek hoor dat jy deesdae hard aan jou golf voorgee werk. And greetings to AVBOB's new CEO, Carl van der Riet. Carl, thanks very much for having me on board again for the seminal moment in South Africa's annual poetry calendar. Greetings as well to Johan de Lange, the editor-in-chief of the project, and a big hello to all the staff at Brand. Most of all, to everyone who with chalk, pencil, pen, typewriter, smartphone, laptop and desktop has dreamed, imagined, wrestled with words, struggled with lines, and sent poems in, on behalf of my fellow editors, I'd like to say thank you for helping to build the Poetry Library. Last August, I thought to myself, entries are a little slow. I wonder if we'll get as many as 2018. It was just the calm before the storm. In the final month, the floodgates opened. Tydens die laaste 2 weke van die kompetisie was dit asof ek onder 'n waterval van gedigte staan, met net 'n teelepel in my hand. In the end, over 30,000 poems across the languages were entered, and over 3,600 accepted. So, the 3-year figures now stand at over 80,000 entered and over 10,000 accepted into the library. Let's hope that 2020, despite the pandemic, is another bumper year. At the time of last year's gala in Pretoria, the world was still running full steam ahead. The gala went smoothly, and the second anthology was launched to acclaim. Now, a year later, and the world is upside down. This pandemic has so much suffering attached to it, and difficulty. So, from all the editors, let me extend our heartfelt commiserations to those of you who have lost loved ones, and to say we wish everyone in the country courage and good health. Now, after 3 years of reading roughly 38,000 entries on my own, I might just be the most hated person in South Africa. Why? Of those entries, I've accepted fewer than 1,000. He's so cruel, I hear someone say. Indeed, I wouldn't be surprised to discover that a contract had been put out on my life. Time for him to sleep with the fishes, I hear a voice muttering. And yet, I think that maintaining a strong, critical line is vital for the integrity of the library. I know and appreciate the fact that each and every poem entered has involved the honest labor of someone with something to say. But the best way to learn what works in the library is to read the poems in the library and the language in which you write. Now, there's a very good poem by the American poet Gary Snyder called Axe Handles. You can find it online. It's about a father teaching a son and about how we learn to make things from a tradition of making things. It's an extended metaphor about learning to be a writer. Snyder quotes from a 14th century Chinese sage. In making the handle of an axe by cutting wood with an axe, the model is near at hand. In other words, to write well, study the library and keep the best poems near at hand. What was most noticeable about 2019's entries was a greater searching for and awareness of line and form. That's a good thing. The more shaped and organized the images and ideas of a poem are, the more resonant and memorable the poem, and the more likely it is to be fit for purpose in the library. I'm sure the other editors have seen similar changes. The range of poems is greater. Tragic poems, angry poems, funny poems, sad poems, ironical poems, feel-good poems, uplifting poems. Choosing the lists of finalists from which winners are selected keeps getting tougher. There are so many contenders. I could have spent the whole of this talk on the poems in this year's anthology, but with limited time, I can only mention a few lines here and there that caught my eye. In the translation from the Afrikaans of Charles-Pierre Nordier's Meditation on Death, Lukabad in July, we find a superb concrete image. A pair of uniformed waiters after service walk like adorned admirals in the reflections of alleyways wet with dew. And in Mike Linden's well-crafted sonnet to Louise on her leaving to study, a poem about the joy and sadness, pride and anxiety that accompany a parent's love of a child, I was struck by an echo of the great poet, W.H. Auden. Slant through the russet grass, the far light streams to pale the grey and patient rocks. Then in a poem on love by Lynette Zukiswa, Songtra, translated from isiXhosa, we can all relish the link between food and love in the line. Her love is like cream in porridge. In the English translation of an isiZulu poem by Untitled Chapter, these lines on traditional healing are used as a refrain. We sucked medicine with fingertips, sipped and were slit. We sipped bitter herbs and were healed. Then in the translation of Tisetso, Matthew Tiber's Setswana poem, My Beloved, we can all recognize the feelings. As the sun rises from the east tomorrow, I will bring your tea. Whitened with the goat's milk from my father's kraal, from the goat that gives birth to twins, the one with spiral horns, and give you steaming bread to break the fast. In a translation of Tintswalo Valoyi's Shitsonga poem, "You have led the way, Father," we find calm wisdom and tradition again. You taught us that a person is a book that is read daily. Therefore, it must have good content. Lastly, let me mention Bernice Pulang Masala's winning English poem of despair, love, and hope, Un. It is a cry from the heart, a charged call to change the way of our society in which we raise boys to become men. By so doing, to release the many women of our society who have to endure the consequences of the way men have been raised. It is a poem for our times. Now, the American environmentalist John Muir wrote that everybody needs beauty as well as bread. Of course, in our country, that's a big ask. But that's also exactly where AVBOB steps in. Their persistent generosity across a broad range of social endeavors makes a big difference in our country. That's the bread of learning. And through the poetry competition, they have opened a space where poetry is freely available to us all. And that's the beauty. We have only to open the door of the poetry library, open our eyes and open our minds and read. So I can only admire Frick, Carl, and everyone at AVBOB for having authored this unique resource.
Thank you, Douglas, for sharing those stories of reflection and selection with us. We're now thrilled to announce the remaining 5 language category winners of the 3rd annual AVBOB Poetry Competition. In 3rd place in the Sesotho language category, we have Puleng Nto. And in 2nd place, we have Khobani Mohapi. And the winner of the 3rd AVBOB Poetry Competition in the Sesotho language category is
Sekobo Samuel Moshe.
Based in Bloemfontein, Sekobo Moshe is a prolific award-winning author, mentor, and performance artist who writes anything from radio dramas to novels. He is the founder of the Yaka Nalane by History Arts Development Center, a celebrated praise poet, and is studying towards his master's degree in marketing management. He entered the competition to encourage fellow South Africans to cherish Sesotho poetry with its rich idioms. In 3rd place in the Setswana language category, we have Jonas Mapona. And in 2nd place, we have Ontlametse Ntwayachai. And the winner of the 3rd AVBOB Poetry Competition in the Setswana language category is
Liesel Motlankane.
Liesel Motlankane grew up in the rural village of Ganalaagte and now lives in Potchefstroom. Mentored by well-known writer Kabelo Khatea, he is the first undergraduate student from Northwest University to publish an anthology of Setswana poems. He believes poetry is vital for expressing one's feelings and raising awareness in others. He entered the competition because he feels that one's mother tongue needs to be nurtured and recognized. In 3rd place in the Siswati language category, we have Famoti Mdluli. And in 2nd place, we have Begetele Mahlalela. And the winner of the third AVBOB Poetry Competition in the Siswati language category is
Sibahle Twala.
Sibahle Twala attends school in the village of Jeppes Reef, Mpumalanga. He entered the competition because he felt it would provide him with a way to touch the lives of others through his words. He began writing poetry at the age of 12 and drew inspiration from Shakespeare and T.S. Eliot. He is an insatiable reader who borrows books from his teachers to read at home. In third place in the Tshivenda language category, we have Lufuno Masuvekele. And in second place, we have Mafuta Mengwai. And the winner of the third AVBOB Poetry Competition in the Tshivenda language category is
Mtakadzeni Makuya.
Mtakadzeni Makuya was born and lives in Matangari, Thohoyandou, and works as an opera news hub creator, what she calls her hustle job. A friend encouraged her to enter the competition, and she saw it as a platform to reach out to the world. After the death of a community member in a car accident, she crafted her poem to comfort the bereaved. In third place in the Xitsonga language category, we have Ringeta Lucky Rikotso. And in second place, we have Tinyiko Lucky Ngoben. And the winner of the third AVBOB Poetry Competition in the Xitsonga language category is
Given Macheke.
Given Macheke lives in the small, dusty village of Ngezimani in Limpopo. He started writing poetry back in 1998, but was forced to slow down as a lack of finances curtailed his publishing ventures. He entered the competition to promote the Xitsonga language, to encourage a love of poetry, and to showcase his talent. His poem takes inspiration from the way people bravely manage their grief. Carl, it must be thrilling to announce the winners of the third annual AVBOB Poetry Competition. They hail from all over South Africa and they bring their distinct voices to the platform. How does this make you feel?
Roseanne, it's immensely gratifying being part of this entire project. But when you see the joy and the validation that this brings to each of our winners, and when you understand the impact that this has on their lives, it is immensely uplifting. We're so proud of our winners and of the incredible depth and abundance of talent that we have in the country.
We celebrate each and every one of our winning poets tonight. They are brave pioneers in prosody and wondrous workers of wordcraft who use their verse and their voices to uplift and sustain us all. A big thank you to you as well, Carl, for your support and help this evening.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. And another such pioneering poet is spoken word artist, author, rap musician, and radio presenter Given Masilela. His work is best known for its raw vulnerability and honesty, and an unapologetic propensity to encourage hope, faith, and love. Through his work, Given aims to challenge contemporary culture to return to a more ethical and God-driven way of life. His writing, performances, and music have been described as capturing real human experiences, whilst offering cathartic, healing transcendence. He'll be performing Lelokaya Isilifisa Silesaba by Kwenza Kwenkosi Emmanuel Hlongwane, an isiZulu poem from the AVBOB Poetry Anthology.
Lelokaya esilifisa silesaba. Ekhaya wawumbamba iqhaza elikhulu. Ungumabizwa esabele. Ungumathunywa avume. Uyikho konke kithi. Zinyobulala. Wawuyisibonele emphakathini. Uyivela kancane lomuntu omusha kulezi zinsuku. Ohloniphayo, othobileyo, nokhutheleyo. Bonke kuwe babebona umholi wakusasa. Sasithu yoba yisiqethevu njengoyihlo. Sowenzo wemali eshisiweyo. Uphila ntofontofo nomndeni wakho. Uphethwe ngokwethwesa iminyezane yephakeme. kuvela empokophelweni nasentshisekalweni, yakhe enyathukweni yasemthonjeni wolwazi. Minyaka yonke ububashaya ubaqwaqwada uma senibhuquzisana nezivivinyo. Izintaba namafa kwakumthuqasi, zisho ngezimbokode zamatshe abomvu. Imifula yonke ingamadwala nesihlabathi, amanzana senkonyana eyithombokala. Izinkomo zibukeka zingonomgedlewana, eziningi zibhabhalele emihosheni. Labuyisa izikhatha zamafa yalukayo, zaqhilika izihlathi selithulile amawathanga. Ladamuka kwezwakala amasele nkalo zonke, kwezwakala imihoshi iholoba amanzi. Ladamuka laphenya lisithwe ngelimnyama. Kulowo mzuzu okwasishaqisayo sakuqaphela kokuthi wawungabuyi emthonjeni wolwazi. Ngomzuzwane obezibonele ngawakhe wafika, sasangane emakhanda ethi silale ngonxeba. Osawela umfula wangenisa wena waminza. Manjalo baphuma nkalo zonke bazosiduduza. Othisha bakho bathi bafelo lwembiza njengathi. Ontanga yakho bathi basele dengwane. Bafika nabenkolo, bafika badedelana. Basiduduza babuye wena bakuhalalisele. Bathi inkambo yakho encomekayo banethembi yokuvulela masango alelo khaya esilifisa silesaba.
May the gates of that home we long for open up for you. The poet's words remind us that there is a world beyond our own world, a place of peace and plenty that awaits us all. But for the present, we dwell in the land of the living, with all its changes, challenges, and quests, and it is the poets who help us to navigate our world through the rhythm of their verse, the power of their voices, and the song of themselves. Please put your hands together for our final poetry performance, where Funo, Loftus, Gedibone, and Given join forces.
It was the dragon snaking down to meet her rose tattoo that grabbed me through the haze of rising mercury and fumes.
As in just one fleeting frame, magic flickered on live screen, and the traffic hung suspended in a backdrop to the scene.
Uninhabited elation spiked the air. She was the sun around whom the earth rotated in her galaxy. She spun.
Luminescence on the pavement as she rocked her rhinestone crown, owning yesterday's tomorrows in a vintage wedding gown.
A poet is a poet because of other poets. What better way to craft a winning poem than by reading the winning and commissioned poems published in the 3 volumes of I Wish I'd Said, the print anthology produced each year as a result of the annual poetry competition. And what better way to celebrate South African poetry than by supporting our local poets? As the end of the year draws closer, why not consider gifting someone all 3 volumes of the highly collectible I Wish I'd Said? And as our evening draws to a close, we encourage you to capture this feeling of connection across cultures, distances, and languages, and convert it into a compelling call to all potential poets across our magnificent land to enter the 4th AVBOB Poetry Competition, which opened on the 1st of August and will run until the 30th of November 2020. May this be the bountiful beginning of yet another year of hope and healing, of comfort and connection. Thank you and good night.